Hi again. Now comes the second part of our four-part session in today's date of Homo Ludens, this interdisciplinary forum on the philosophy and the psychology of video games. Our previous talk was given by Ishvan Sultan Sardai. Our next talk, in turn, is gonna focus more on the psychology side. So our speaker in this second talk is Demis Basso. Demis is cognitive psychology PhD from Sapienza University of Rome. He's full professor at the Faculty of Education at the Free University of Bolzano in Italy. He's also currently involved in projects related to visual spatial planning, prospective memory, mind wandering, and mathematical education. So without further ado, Demis, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, but mainly for having invited me to participate to this very interesting workshop. Well, as you can see from the title, I will lead a discussion that is touching the goal, that is video games, just one side, but it is introducing a comparison between a kind of, say, a subset of video games and old-fashioned games, and evaluating whether there are pros and cons between them in our life. Therefore, let's make a kind of summary about the presentation. We are going to deal with some aspects about motivation, because it's something that would be maybe different, the perspective that I'm presenting, different from what people would expect by the common description of what motivation is. But in this case, it's also important to describe why there are similarities and differences between these two ways to deal with games. Then a brief also excursus on the processing of perception action that was also introduced by the previous speaker, but indeed there would be another perspective, the embodied perspective, that in my opinion could contribute to the discussion. Then let's dig into the two main topics. On one hand, the manipulatives, so the games that we generally had when we were children, and the serious games, in this case virtual serious games, given that there could be also serious games that are commonly in real life, but we are talking about those that are presented using the computer or smartphone, tablets, and so on. Then upon the description of them, we are going to make a critical comparison, and then let's evaluate what we should do with the knowledge that we acquired in this presentation. Indeed, starting from motivation, I'd like to introduce you with that theory, the interpersonal motivational systems. It's not brand new, because it has been put forward more or less 30 years ago. But instead of making or bothering you with the old classical positions, I'm gonna present you this one that, in my opinion, could solve many problems that the old theories still have. And why do I consider this theory more relevant? Also because there is evidence coming from different fields, evolutionism, ethology, and also neurosciences, in which there is a pattern that is common between all these three and more sciences that lead us to consider that there could be a certain number and a certain type of motivational systems, depending on our real life, depending on the needs that we need to consider in our everyday life. And which are these biosocial targets? Well, there could be behaviors that could be separated in categories depending on the motivation that underlies them, according to the goal that we may have in order to achieve this satisfaction, this goal, and so on. So there are generally 5 to 6 7 sometimes different motivations or patterns, categories. But in this case, there is agreement upon the first 5, the couple attachment and caregiving. Attachment is when a person is asking for help, and there should be somebody that has a certain motivation to correspond to this need, a caregiver that is providing help to a person that is asking for something. Then the other couple, competition against cooperation. Indeed, they are not one against the other, because competition is extremely important when we have to define the rank between ourselves. So what do we do? What do we do in a society if there's not a leader? That's the point of competition, because you need to define what is the high-ranked person, but you need also to define which are the means, which are the procedures in order to generate that hierarchy. And competition is particularly important in entertainment. For example, when in video games, generally you are competing with enemies, you're competing against yourself in order to beat your records and so on. So you should not think that competition is wrong or should be demolished. Competition is good, and it's one of the motivations that we need to show and we need to manage. On the other hand, cooperation is the one that we use when there are needs or goals that we have, but alone I could not be able to achieve. Therefore, I need to ask your contribution, and therefore we create groups, teams, in order to achieve a common goal. That's cooperation. For mating, well, how can we not consider that one of the most important goals in life is to create a sexual couple? Yeah, not only because of our pleasure only, but also because we need to continue our species. Therefore, we need to create children. Otherwise, our human mankind would disappear. And therefore, there are motivations strongly rooted in ourselves that bring us toward another person. And to some theories, also exploration is important. Try to consider what happens to children, babies, when they are hungry. They look for food, so they show attachment. But after that they were satisfied with the attachment, what happens? Well, if you have children, you can see that they are not sticking to the mother, but they are exploring the environment in order to achieve one of the goals of our life, exploration. That to some extent could also be connected, because in this category there are also other things related to exploration. Not only our main representative of exploration, Indiana Jones, but research. Those who work in the university or research areas are moved by the need of exploration. Then curiosity, but also when we are playing, when we are training ourselves, when we are trying and making errors, and of course, when we are learning. So playing, researching, learning, these are all related to the same motivational system, exploration. Keep that in mind, because in the next minutes, we're going to see how this knowledge could be relevant. But then another contribution of psychology has emerged years ago, and it involved the so-called embodied cognition. Well, let's point to one particular moment in life when we are solving problems. Yeah, what will we do? We solve problems, yeah, but what is the goal of solving problems? Yeah, you solve a problem because there's a problem, because according also to behaviorism, the homeostatic level has been disrupted. So your goal is to get a positive interaction with the world. And in order to make a positive interaction with the world, positive means that you can satisfy your needs, you can save yourself, you can live better. But indeed, in the interaction with the world, you need to move your body. So don't dance, because I know there's also a song that is Move Your Body. But you're talking about really moving our body in the environment. Otherwise, well, nothing is changing. There's not an event if you're not moving your body in order to make the world change somehow. Therefore, sensorial and motor systems are the keys processes in order to both enter the information, and that's everybody agrees upon that, but also for processing information, because in the first moments in which the stimuli are entering our system, we are already selecting information. We are already processing the information. Then further processing could be made by memory, problem solving, language, emotions, and so on. But indeed, there's another moment in which the elaboration takes place. That is the goal of this processing. What do you do with that elaboration? You could generate thoughts, but your thoughts are just for yourself. Generally, when you are creating thoughts, they are made in order to interact with the environment. So let's come back to the first idea. And something that was also observed by Maria Montessori long ago, watching a child makes it obvious that the development of his mind comes about through his movements. Mind and movements are part of the same entity. So we are not talking about a separation between the ways for which we interact in the environment and the way that we process the information. Maybe they are not served by just one single process, but indeed, the processes dealing with these tasks are strongly interconnected. Therefore, the body is also central in every human activity. Istvan said that when we are playing video games, we just move just a little of our body. Yeah, that's true, but a little, that is extremely important. Otherwise, you cannot interact with the environment, with the keyboard or the mouse or the touchscreen or whatever. But indeed, the limited set of movements still are based on the skills that we acquired long ago and that we are now recruiting for this new interpretation of the same tasks. But indeed, this leads us to long ago. So Maria Montessori, in her times, were not assisting to or using computers, but indeed computers emerged more or less 50 years ago. Alessandro, you can correct me at any time. You are an expert. But anyway, long ago, we have learned to interact with the environment through games. And the manipulatives, so the so-called games that are used to simulate objects in the world, but that are simplified, are something that we can count on. And I think that in every family, there are at least 2 or 3 games based on this object. What is a manipulative? Well, there are a set of objects that involves the hands that could be used to learn things. And here I wrote as teaching tools. But indeed, when we are talking about teaching and learning, more or less, it depends on what is the perspective. If you're putting the perspective on the teacher, the person is teaching. If you're putting the perspective on the children are learning. But the process is specular, is mirrored. Indeed, also research has described that there are differences between different manipulatives. And of course, their use in an educational environment depends on whether they are used by the children, they are accepted by the children and by the teachers, so that there could be a certain amount of amusement. Otherwise, if there's not amusement, then you can forget about that, because it's just another task that is prompted by the teacher, and that could be boring as any other task made at the blackboard. But let's see some examples about what I'm talking about. So the good old style, the blocks of the blocks of wood. Well, it's made of wood, made of now plastic sometimes, but indeed simple figures that could promote construction, buildings, cities. What are they for? Yeah, to make people play with safe materials, also not that, let's say, very light, and they do not cost that much, so that people or children could have an amusement. Indeed, it's in the touch, it's a very nice material, but you have generally a limited set of shapes, so that if you like to create something, you can create something that is limited, but you don't have to choose upon a large set, so that you have to make a lot of decisions. Indeed, the sets of objects are those, and you need to work with your ideas in order to create in the real world what you have imagined. And this is one of the skills that in the age between 2 and 6 needs to be fortified. What is not that good about them is that they do not stick to each other. And therefore, if you are creating big structures, on a certain moment, that could be a problem, so that everything falls down. Everything, I mean, not only the project, but also your dreams. And that is definitely not good for children that have worked together onto a project, and then it rushes down. Oh, pity. But then in the history, there were somebody that thought that this problem could be solved. Imagine who? Yes, those bricks. Kiddicraft, yes, because the idea was put forward by this company. Then the most known company that you have imagined for this game has obtained the license and then created a bigger factory. So nobody remember about that, but everybody remembers about the other company. The good of them is they are colorful, they are stickable, they are easy to use, and you can find it. You can find them everywhere in the world. Indeed, stickable, yes, yes, because here you can see that you can put one on the top of the other, and they bind together. That's good, so that you can create stable figures. The point is, however, that you cannot stick them on the other side. So you must follow that direction. You can create the piles, stacks, but it is not that easy to create structures that you can create in real life. So that is one of the cons about this kind of tool. And another con is that there is, due to this problem, the need of special pieces in order to create links on the sides, to create different patterns, and to create something that is responding to the needs of the users. And the needs of the users were the level that was used in order to create further materials, and further materials could satisfy the dreams of the users. Therefore, there was a kind of development, or on a negative, using a negative description of it, an astray. So, for example, for this material that costs more than, let's say a lot, let's say, but yes, you can create this wooden house on the tree, but with the bricks. But indeed, you need a lot of different little pieces, and pay attention not to lose any of them. Yeah, of course, this is an idea that can be used not only to create these, but also other sets of objects, but limited because of the quantity of the materials, or the objects, on the items. Therefore, your ideas are just subjected to the amount of object of items that you can have with that box. But then, starting from the same route, there were also other, say, bad developments. So, for example, what is trending now that you can see by Googling the internet site of that company is that there is a lot of different sets in order to satisfy all the needs that you have. For example, I was puzzled by this old Atari machine, and I was also evaluating whether that could have a chip inside that could replicate the behavior of the actual machine. No, it's just a thing that you can put on the shelves and see it, and maybe pushing a button, you can see a replica of a kind of scenery, static scenery, of what is the game about. But indeed, that was just a part of the story, that you can mimic other things in real life by using that set of items. And that is the problem. With a certain set of items, you can create that object. And it's very difficult to create further objects. Pity, what a pity for fantasy, what a pity for creativity, and so on. But indeed, other needs were also bringing the company to develop a cooperation with Marvel and so on, so that they acquired the license. Thanks, Alessandro, again for the information. And now, if you think about these movies, well, you must consider that that company owns the characters. Therefore, they can present and picture them in every way that they would, and obviously they have created different sets of their material for the different characters. That's merchandising, and it is maybe different from the idea that I had when I was a child. And from for my 6th birthday, I received a box of bricks made of just bricks without any picture on it, so that you cannot be swayed by any idea. So now you have the material, build what you want. And that could be difficult for children that have not ideas, but could be definitely relevant for those that now have the tools to do something. And this nowadays is almost impossible with that company. Then again, third moment in which I'm thankful to Alessandro Colombi, that is going to talk after me, but he presented me with this material. There are cubes and a little set of other half cubes and axle and so on. But indeed, the idea behind this is that there could be connections in all the sides of the cube, so that, for example, you can bind them horizontally, vertically, but also diagonally. So you can bind in the same moment on all the different directions. And that is solving one problem that the previous company had and still has. And indeed, well, the point is, what could we use this material for? Yeah, to play good, but only to play? Nope, because there could be also the ideas of the teachers in order to involve this material to make children learn. And that's a bunch of projects that we are now developing here in this university. And let's play. Let's see something that could be done with this. So, for example, you can take a set of cubes. Here is the cube. I'm introducing that with you. And you can bind it to another one in every position, depending on whether you would like to see it in a different way. But then what could you do? You can also bind them with some joints so that you can create machines to learn movements. And I'm not talking about pinching or grasping. Here, I'm talking about the movements of the elbow and so on. You can create movements. Or what should I do? Or let's turn it on the same direction, but on the other way around. Okay. It's not that easy because they are bound not on the same position. So the movement cannot be specular. And in this case, there could be also other movements that can be done. So to move them independently on different sides, on different directions, moving the one and the second one that are not connected to my fingers, but they cannot be touched. Therefore, I need to use just the lateral sticks in order to move them. And that is a skill that Istvan was saying that is commonly used by our body, but indeed not in this specific task. And therefore, you need to learn other ways to implement that skill. But indeed, the material offers you also other things. So, for example, you can bind also with these red wheels, so that by creating machines like that, you can move objects on a different space, on a different level, and with different goals, also at distance. Well, there could be also tasks depending on your ideas. So, for example, if I'm giving you some objects of this kind and a goal that is this table, for which you can just touch this corner, but your goal is, by using the material that I showed to you, is to put down this object that is on the opposite corner. So how would you use the material in order to achieve that without touching anything but the only point here in the corner? Well, let me bind a machine so that you can stick this to that, and you can create a long arm to be set on the corner that you can possess. And your goal is here. And now you're ready to put it down. Oh my God, but it does not come to the point. Oh, don't you have forgot that stick? Yes, therefore, let me attach it, and then let's obtain the goal. Here it is. Don't you know how is the satisfaction of a person that is achieving the desired goal by solving a problem? Yes, the point is creating good problems. So the task is central rather than the material, but the material allows a person to exploit these ideas. Then there could be also other things, for example, interesting things, for example, sensors, lights, then a sensor for touch, a sensor for light, accelerometers, and other things, so that you can also create robots. Well, that is a kind of mouse with two lights instead of the eyes, moved by the batteries here, that is moving a software that you can control also using Scratch. But this controls not only the eyes, but also the two engines here that could move the wheels, so that you can also mimic a kind of movement of the leg and the feet and the foot of the mouse. So what should I do with this? Whatever you want. So if you want to use it in order to make children learn how to bind things, okay. If you wanted to use in order to make students learn mechanics, well, that's it. If you wanted to use it for develop robotics, then here you have it. If you wanted to use it in order to exercise children's ability to solve problems, it's up to you again. That's about the power of sticking object with your hands. So obviously there's also a part that could be developed by using the computer, but the main part is to create. And by creating, you need to use your body. But we are in a conference in which we are supposed to talk about video games. So how this is related to video games? Well, here you can find say a bunch of examples that could be familiar to everybody of yours. And indeed, there could be also some strangers, the raving rabbits, that may change the idea of this one, because in this case, you can use also some other devices so that you can move your body in order to make the main character to make movements in its world, so that you can achieve your goals. But indeed, the main the majority of these video games are responding to the issues described by Istvan before this presentation. Indeed, what is their goal? They are made to have fun, to make you enjoy, to entertain you. But sometimes you are also challenged by their problems in order to solve the tricks related to, for example, the environment in which you can find this character. Maybe then in the discussion, you can tell me whether you have recognized this character and from which video game is it taken. But then it is also important to practice skills. Which are skills? Skills, not only motor skills, but also other skills that are related to perception, attention. And there's a study by Franceschini, Facquetti, and so on, other colleagues from another university in Italy, that have described that by playing to a certain set of games related to this character, the raving rabbits, children having dyslexia could improve their ability to read after training, not based on phonology, based on just playing with that game. And therefore, there should be something related to the skills that are not only motor or perceptual, but also attentional, but also emotional or problem solving involved in these basic video games. What is a new wave of video games is related to the serious games, which are a set of the so-called process called gamification, which is aimed to create games for learning. And why do you use a game in order to make children or students learn? Well, it is used to explore distant settings. So, for example, history, geography, physics, physiology inside the body, biology of animals, but also to real settings outside in the world. So to study the heritage, particular places that are extremely important for a culture, or visiting museums that could have some special areas, rooms that are equipped in order to be visited online. And indeed, it is related to the evaluation of the consequences of the actions that you may have with respect to your world. So let's consider the fact that in video games, in serious games, there could be some environment in which a person can experiment something that in the world cannot be done. So in this case, you can also try to see what happens if. And this is particularly serious because it produces learning by not doing, but by thinking. That's something that is related to imagination, but without managing the imagination only by ourselves. We are the master of our minds. But what happens if we imagine something to happen and then somebody is controlling the outcomes? That is learning. Learning that connects the consequences of an action and the beliefs, the ideas, the plans that we made in order to make this action. But we can satisfy our ideas, evaluating that the conclusion, the consequences are the one that we planned, or we can think that this process was wrong because it was not producing the intended consequences. Indeed, what are the most common set of serious games are those that are produced for mobile game, for console, or also virtual reality on the computer. But indeed, we are talking about not the serious games in general, but we are talking about the virtual serious games. And why are they serious? Well, the main reasons is because you can distinguish them from the games made just for entertainment. Made just for entertainment, it doesn't mean that the serious games are not entertaining themselves, because if they do not entertain a person, a student, what should be the advantage with respect to a normal lesson, given that that game is supposed to be useful? Yeah, but it is useful, but it needs also to be something for which I like spending time on it. Therefore, there should be an advantage also with respect to the enjoyment of a person. But also it is serious because the cognition, developing human mind, is not just a game. Well, that is a different perspective with respect to what all cognitive psychologists think, because exercise, homework, training, well, these are all different methods, like a game, to develop skills. So playing things, well, you are developing skills, like when you are exercising, when you're doing your homeworks, when you're training, and so on. Therefore, cognition is based on games. And nobody can bring up a child without making this child play. Play is one of the duties of a family when a person is young, but also when the person is adult. But indeed, school is not seen as a place where children can play. You can play at home. When you are in school, you must learn. Yeah, could you remember what I said in the beginning? Playing and learning are of the same kind. So there are different ways to achieve the same motivation. But also consider what do babies and toddlers do when they are at that age. How do they learn? Yeah, they learn things very, very fast. And what do? They are playing. Therefore, think and bring in mind that serious is serious, meaning that it's congruent, it's relevant. It doesn't mean that it is also austere. So serious means that if you are proposing me to achieve this, you are congruent, you are reliable, and you are going to satisfy this. So there's a congruency between what you said and what you do. That's being serious. And serious games are made to make you learn by playing. So, commonalities and differences between serious games and virtual serious games and manipulatives. But first of all, they are not on the opposite ends of a continuum. So they are not extremely different, but there are similarities, commonalities, and also differences. For example, they share many features. They are both games. Sometimes they are used for learning. Also, the manipulatives are games, but sometimes they are used to develop skills. And potentially, they are available in every family. Also, the virtual serious games, because you just need to have a link whether the provider has provided you with that link, and you can access it from everywhere. Now you just need to have a smartphone that is equipped with a certain app, and you can see the augmented reality, and therefore you can explore virtual environments for different goals. Then there could be also some differences. For example, the modality of handling them is different. You use your own body with the manipulatives, use a part of your body for the interaction with the computer. That's also related to interactivity, but sometimes we need also to consider the costs. So depending on whether there could be some material that is available on the one hand, on the other hand, sometimes you need to pay the fees or a license, or you need to have a device that provides you with access. Therefore, there are different costs associated to the two modalities. Here, I try to summarize some differences and some commonalities between the two main features and the two main protagonists of the story of today. So talking about cognition and emotions, well, you activate many cognitive skills and also many emotions, both by using the manipulatives and also the serious games. Of course, there could be, they are different, but still they are many. The sensory skills, however, may differ. So you have audiovisual, tactile, and proprioceptive, and also gustative, because you can also put them in your mind, in your mouth, for the manipulatives. But for the serious games, it is just audiovisual. You cannot interact with the keyboard in any other way, just stroking the keys. And the embodiment perspective is for the manipulatives direct, because you have them in your hands. So you can also play as creating a shower by throwing them up and then making them falling down the head of a person. That's a shower that you can create with them. With the serious games, you can visit different places, but still you need to keep your eyes on the monitor. So it's something different with respect to the level of involvement of your body. And also, let's consider the physical interaction, that generally also the manipulatives are restricted to the sensorial input and the hand. You're not playing with the feet, but indeed that is similar with respect to manipulatives and serious games. Social interaction. Think about sharing your wooden sticks or your Arctic cubes, and there could be a group of people working with that, creating a common project. With the serious games, the social interaction is still possible, but difficult, because there should be some devices that are connected with each other, and therefore there should be a net, and the program need to be created in order to admit the possibility to a multi-user. And therefore, that could be, but it is limited on the amount of users that could be connected at any time. While it is quite limited, the amount of children in this class that can enjoy with the objects. And the need and the speed that is needed in order to, or is required in order to create things, it is generally low for the manipulatives, because you can have also the time for reflect about what to do. While for the serious games, generally they are fast, because you expect something on the monitor that is faster, depending on the history that we had on the TV, but also on the computer games. If something is not moving, like me now, well, you can feel that it's pretty boring. The results for the manipulatives is that it is tangible. You can obtain an object, you can touch it, you can see it, but also you can use it. Then the virtual results of the serious games may be printed, but it's something that is not satisfying as a real object. The personalization could be made because of the task and the setting which we are using the manipulatives. While for the serious games, you can have a higher amount of settings that you can change. You can have a higher amount of personalization depending on the color, depending on the whatever the programmer has defined. But indeed, they are all auditory or visual features that can be modified. Then, whenever this brings up to evaluate whether it is friendly with disabilities, well, generally, the manipulatives are okay, except for the problems about motricity. But for the serious games, just some of them could be enjoyed. Think about the people with hypovision or blinds. They can still bind some bricks and touch them with their hands. It is almost impossible to get any information from a monitor of the computer. So, as a conclusion, manipulatives and virtual serious games were the subject of this talk. Both are useful, both could help learning, true in different ways. And we have seen that both could activate the exploratory motivational system. So in order to do so, the task is central. So what would you do with that object? Either it is a cube, either it is a wooden stick of, from a tree, or it is a computer program. What do you use it for? That's the main question. And remember that also in this presentation, we have not seen something that could be also in the average position between these two, because the real world serious games were not mentioned, but they are still part of the story. So that you can create serious games, or serious games could be used and created and used, so that you can imagine to be in a certain environment because of the actions that you are performing on a table, on an object that is mimicking the object that was created years ago. And therefore, you can still have objects that could be touched and used in serious games, not virtual serious games. So the conclusion is that, as you can have also the idea, I'm in favor more of the manipulatives rather than the virtual serious games, even though I'm working in both of them. So I'm not, let's say, prone on one or the other, but I'm still moved by the exploratory motivational system because I'm curious to see what are the cognitive effects of the two methods. But if you wanted to know where my heart is on the block. Therefore, by rephrasing a certain sentence that is, give me a block hold, and then I can raise the earth if a task is given. So thank you, and I invite you to make comments, questions about everything also that was not presented in this talk.
Thank you very much, Demis, for that interesting talk. We're gonna wait for perhaps a few questions from the members of audience. We remind everybody watching these talks live that they can post their questions in the live chat in any platform they're using at the moment, either YouTube or Zoom. But to begin with, while we wait for the these questions will be passed on to us, and we can we post them to Demis and Alessandro and then Ken. But for the time being, I wonder if Istvan or perhaps Alessandro want to jump in, want to intervene on this, on the subject Demis just talked about.
I will be more than happy to thank, first of all, Demis, because he cited me a couple of times, and I'm really grateful to him for his gratefulness, and But in order to not be circular, I just want to compliment him because of the scientific approach that he used on describing you some of the topics we are also collaborating on trying and experimenting with. And I have to prepare you because my speech will be totally different, at least not being so scientifically based or scientifically baked, because it's more related to philosophy and history of technology and sociological reflection upon it. But I will simply thank Demis, because without him, the fusion of these little cubes that I have actually met by total chance during a meeting at the Media Lab MIT, during a conference related to kids and programming. Without him, they will not never be perceived at all in the school, because I'm too busy and maybe not focused enough to help them succeed. So in order to be clear, these little cubes are a real wonder, because they extend the idea of Maria Montessori, for example, reflected on the materials, on the method and on the so-called method and materials of the cubes. But for the audience and for anyone interested on education and early education of kids, please consider that these cubes could also boost, given the difference between the Lego traditional and the no more patented blocks made by Lego, because Lego it's now more than 75 years in 2000, I don't remember, 20. So anyone can build blocks like the Lego ones, and not yet like the Artec ones. But Artec is a very small business in Japan. They are very cheap. They are not at all involved in marketing stuff. But let me underline, as a pedagogist and a father, that the work of Demis is very relevant, because the issue we have and some of them will be also touched by my speech in some minute, are related to the usage of the hands. And these cubes are tricky to use, are much more difficult to use than the Lego ones, not in a difficult way that blocks, that slow down the kid. In a difficult way that Seymour Papert, the inventor of so-called computational thinking, the guy who used the word computational thinking as first, but the guy who invented the interface for the Lego Mindstorm, what then became the Lego Mindstorm, used to say that kids need to have hard fun, not just fun. So getting a kid to build something with these cubes force you to see that the kid, for example, at 3 years old, they get pictures of this kind of situation, several ones. They cannot get easy to the end of the building, because there's always this little pin jumping off at the end of the buildings. So they don't get exactly, instantly, automatically, the logic of these cubes. And when they get it, you can already be teaching them Pythagorean theorem, even if they're not able to read, write, or count, because you can put it on paper, on millimetrical paper, and since the cube are 1 centimeter side, you can help kids count. And this is what, in my word, is wonderful about what Demis is doing. And I talk a lot, but just to say thank you, Demis. Really, thank you, thank you, thank you.
I don't know if Demis wants
what
to.
should I do? It's a circular work, because I could not work in this field without him. But most importantly is that that is not for our own profit or for our own sake. We really love to see children happy and to make them working happy. Therefore, that's our common goal. Full stop.
Thank you very much, Demis. I don't know if Ishvan. I also had I don't know if something between a commentary and a comment and a question to make, but I don't know if Ishvan has a point he wants to raise.
Yeah, Demis, thank you. Lovely talk, very interesting stuff, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you for tying in my points. So one of the things I was wondering about, like when you contrast the serious games and the non-serious games, is you mentioned that the motivation is similar, but like I was wondering, like the serious games seem to have a lot more, maybe how to say, trying to get people to do a lot more specific activities very often, not always. I'm sure there are lots of exceptions, but also when you mentioned the video games, this came to my mind, you know, about the exploration aspect, like Prince of Persia was there and some other amazing games. So how do you see that in is that the same? Is it the same with all games, or do you think that there is a qualitative difference between how motivation is engaged, how much of this exploration is engaged? Or is it really the same concept covers all cases?
Well, that's coming back to the very beginning, talking about the motivational systems. Well, when you are engaged into an activity, there's not only one. Maybe one is primary, but other are also cooperating or pushing you into a conflict. So for sometimes you need to take care about a person, but you know that by doing that you could challenge your current partner because that person was your ex-fiancé. Therefore, there's a conflict between motivations, and it's up to you, the decision. But indeed, you said that whether there's a difference between normal games, video games, and virtual serious games. Indeed, they should be games, but the difference is related to the amount of competition and the amount of cooperation that could be involved. So the exploration is maybe almost, maybe more or less the same, because it depends on the way that the program is challenging you in making you learn new things. Think about the curve by Atkinson related to the amount of difficulty of the task and your performance. That is the U reverse of the U curve, so that the amount of difficulty may increase your motivation, but up to a certain moment for which that is too challenging for you, and therefore your motivation decreases. But indeed, that's part of the task, the content of this game. But indeed, some peculiar differences are related in general to the amount of competition that is higher for a game, rather in the serious games, there could be also cooperation with a higher amount. So, for example, you can also involve the other children. Let's imagine a situation in which there's one child that is mounting the head-mounted glasses, let's say, so that it displays in which this person can see the virtual scenario. And maybe on the an overhead projector is presenting what the person is looking to the other people, the other children that are there. So maybe, sorry, the person that is wearing the device is in charge of being the actor, moving and making the ultimate decision, but can ask for the help of the other people that can cooperate, depending on what is the task, in this case, given by the teacher. So that could be a level of cooperation that is higher with respect to a game that generally all the people are maybe not only cooperating between among them into the solve of the maze, into solving the maze, but generally they are also competing with each other in order to see what is the best. That's corresponding to the competitional system. Therefore, generally, that is one of the main difference with respect to the normal games and the serious games, depending on the perspective of the motivation.
Thank you, Demis. That's very interesting. You know, I sometimes teach English, and there are a lot of different games I play with the kids, and I think this really I like this reply because it helps bring into focus how competitive you make the games. Really changes a lot how different kids can engage with it. You know, there are kids who love the very competitive ones, and they do best of those when they really feel that it's mostly about the competitive aspect. They can beat the others. But then there are people who like an element of competition, who is faster within our team, but ultimately it's about cooperation for them. Yeah, because and these tasks develop very different capacities and abilities, of course. You're absolutely right. Yeah, yeah.
But
That's
it,
very
it is
nice.
also,
Okay.
and
Yeah,
I
go
was
ahead.
adding that also by doing these games, different games. So I'm not saying that people should or children should not do the games like shooting and so on. They can do that so that they can also see the differences, and in this case they can develop a variety of motivation by being exposed to different settings. And my suggestion is to think about what you're doing, not just to being passively, as you also described in your talk. That there's a big difference between a passive action that is not an action, but it's a sequence of events, and an action that is made by an agent.
Thank you, Demis, and thank you, Sultan. I'll skip my question. So for the sake of time, I'll just end this by commenting that in the live chat, Chara Saracini mentioned recognized one of the characters in your presentation, Demis, as Stan Stanman, the boat seller, the boat merchant from Monkey Island. So
yes, correct.
How to forget that? And
yes, it's very. So, it's very difficult to forget whenever somebody is acting this way, so that you can be merged or say swayed by the nonverbal communication.
Yeah, and I'm very reminiscent of a standard politicians. Okay, I don't want to get into that. But thank you very much, Demis. Once again, thank you, Alessandro and Ishvan for your questions and comments as well. So we're gonna make a short break here. We're gonna stop for 5 minutes, and then we're gonna come back with the third talk in today's session with Alessandro's talk. So for the time being, that's it. But we will be right back in 5 minutes. Thank you.